4. Good evening. 7 o'clock here in Queensland, 9 o'clock in New Zealand, 10 a.m. in the morning over in the UK, and you're on Radio FM 88 Australia. Got a new surroundings in the background there. That's because of our guest, Mr. Gerard Bini. He's in the bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see Gerard's forte is this 5G, electromagnetic radiation, Earth radiation, and it's a fantastic subject we're going to be speaking about. Up in the top corner is my co-host, Julia Chai.
Hey.
And I just want to introduce you to this photo here. And anyone who has attended any festivals, particularly the Body Health and Harmony festivals, Body Mind Harmony, they've all got different names, but I'll tell you what, you're going to see Gerard there, and the reason you're going to see him there is that he offers a free service where he goes and checks out your property for any radiation patterns that surround your house. And so without further ado, I hand you over to Julia and Gerard, and we're in for a fascinating time. Thank you very much, guys. Come on.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome, Gerard. It's very pleased to have you on the show, and it's very topical at the moment. You know, I think a lot of us have been aware of radiation and electromagnetic fields from things like modems, and I will admit that I am one of those people that is going to make you rich, because you get $1 every time you meet someone who says they switch off the Wi-Fi or modem at night, midnight. My teenagers are very happy to not be living with me because they don't have to switch it off anymore. But
that's a common line I use. I wish I had $1 for every person that says they would turn their modems off at night time, because I don't need to, because they shut down when you're not on the internet.
Yeah. So Gerard, you're more technical than I am. So perhaps for the audience, just explain, how is it that you know things like that?
From my consultancy experience, I call myself an intuitive building biologist for 20 years. And that's where I go to people's houses and we look at the different radiation issues. But we just don't look at, Wi-Fi and electrical radiation. They're only 2 out of, 20 or 30 different types you could experience in a house. And the Wi-Fi modem thing's something that I've actually gone and tested in many houses to actually show people that when no one's on the internet, the router shuts down, to actually take the fear away, really. Because a lot of people are very fearful about radiation from a modem, and I have a misunderstanding that the radiation from the modem will actually cover the whole house. It won't. It only extends out 2 meters at the most, only when someone's on the internet. When the internet's turned off, it shuts itself down.
Mm. And I guess that's the thing is about the word radiation, and it's, I was thinking about that, why does it cause so much fear and distress? And at the moment, there's the TV show on what happened in Maralinga, and the atomic tests that were conducted by the British on Australian soil near Adelaide, and the radiation was flying through the air and poisoning people. We all remember Hiroshima, Chernobyl, and then more recent, the Fukushima disaster. But there's radiation and radiation, right? So when we talk radiation from devices like mobile phones and mobile phone telephone towers, it's different from, obviously, things that have exploded.
They're different, but they all have one thing in common. They're all fields that have what they call a positive charge. And that positive charge...
Sorry, what was that?
They're all fields that have what they call a positive charge. And the positive charge interferes with our meridian energy, which feeds energy to our organs, because our meridians operate out of a negative charge. So if you've got too much positive charge in there in the form of a field, it will impact on the negative charge frequency and strength of your meridians to supply energy to your organs.
I've just brought up a photo there of, schematics that I've got off your site there, about the body there with all the different meridians there. So.
Yeah, it's a classic. And there's some major meridians. There's the central meridian, your heart meridian, liver meridian, stomach meridian, large intestine meridian, a triple warmer meridian, which is your hormone meridian. All of those meridians which feed energy to our vital organs. They're all affected by radiation. Which ones affect a person depends on the person's makeup. And I have this theory that people have I call it a junk DNA weakness. And for example, mine's thyroid. Jeff, yours is a large intestine. Yours is thyroid too. Sorry, what's your name? Kathy?
Juliet.
Juliet, sorry. Your weakness is thyroid. And I can read that because I'm also an intuitive. And so I developed a range of EMF protection pendants when you're out and about of different colours for different weaknesses. So blue for thyroid, white for heart, green for liver, orange for intestines and stomach, pink for heart too, purple for spleen.
So when you, can I just ask, so when you look at, you just basically did it, just identified our weak spots, is that sort of, that you're sensing that our aura is indented there and therefore that area is more susceptible to external radiation, or how do you sort of differentiate?
You hit the nail on the head, exactly. See, our vital organs make up the strength of our biofield, and when our vital organs are healthy and have the right energy, which has a negative charge, then our biofield, our energy field, increases in size and has a very strong negative charge. That then, when you encounter a radiation field that has a positive charge, prevents the meridians from going into what I call radiation stress, which is, it maintains the meridian energy to the organs.
Great. Okay, well that makes sense.
It's quite simple. Like if your weakness is thyroid, you're going to have a hole in your biofield there.
Yes, the hole, yeah. Yeah, I do Qigong and sometimes I feel the holes or the vacuums on people. So
and that hole has a positive charge, which is in sympathy with the radiation charge, which then causes more electromagnetic stress on other meridians too.
Right. So when, and this isn't just me associating, fear associating the radiation that we hear about in daily lives, and when somebody goes for chemo radiation,
Yep.
are they getting the, what you're saying is a damaging positive?
Yeah, exactly. Different frequencies, which might be beneficial for the treatment, still will have that positive charge.
And so you studied, how did you get into this field that you know so much about this?
Oh, it was curiosity. Like 25, 30 years ago, everything I read had to do with aeroplanes, because I was a private pilot and I worked in the construction industry. I one day just maybe had an enlightenment, so to speak, and started reading books which were not about aeroplanes all the time. I taught myself how to dowse using pendulums and divining rods. Then I was introduced to members of what they call the Dowsing Society in Victoria, which back then taught the very, very, very basics of building biology. And a couple of the guys from the Dowsing Society took me under their wings and taught me how they do a survey on a house. And way back then, knowledge of what we know now was like that much compared to that much. And I was fascinated by it. I was curious by it. And my dowsing skills, I picked them up very, very quickly. And dowsing is the original building biology. It goes back at least 400 years in Europe, especially Germany. Using dowsing tools like, for example, a biotensor, which is my favourite EMF reading tool, not an EMF meter, shows the real charge field. The EMF meters cannot be, are not all that accurate. So I taught myself to use all these fancy tools, which then led me to discover a lot more different types of radiation houses, not just electrical and Wi-Fi. So it just grew from there. And in about 1999, I started making my first energy harmonizing balancing products. And probably 2004, I developed the first geocleanse, and nothing like that. And we just grew and grew from there. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to have our 20th birthday anniversary celebration with a new website and a couple of new products and things like that.
This is a product you you're talking about, isn't it? You just had it in your hand.
Oh,
Bring-
that's a geoclins, yeah. It's a geoclins. And the other one's a stellodome, which is that there. That's a new product from last year, and that's phenomenal. That was an old product called Space Clearing Dome, and we decided to put it on steroids. And after we put it on steroids, we realised we created a monster, not a bad monster, but a good monster, and that now can compete with that because the geoclins will do an entire building. This will do it too.
Oh, sorry. That what do you call it? Hang on a sec.
Oh, stellodome.
Yeah, so these ones here, because people will probably look at that and think you've got all the different plugs to suit whatever country you got, but by throwing up the dome, you don't need all these different plugs, do you?
Exactly. Like in Germany, we have issues because they demand CE certificates because it's got an electrical plug in it, but it doesn't have a circuit in it. The green component of the geoclins is a man-made crystal, and it's actually quite sophisticated, and we don't give away the process or the formulation or the frequencies that they're being infused with, or the programs. And so the stellodome in European countries where they're a bit funny about whatever's being plugged into a power point bypasses that completely.
Can you bring that up again, actually? Because I never got a photo for that. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay, and I'll just pull ourselves out so you can see it. Hang on a sec.
It's got this gorgeous little bottom on it. And the beauty about it is it's portable. Like Leanne, my wife, is sitting over here with a champagne everywhere she goes. She has one in her handbag. Actually, everywhere I go, I have a stellodome in my pocket. Like I can sense radiation, but I'm not affected by radiation. I'm not electro-hypersensitive. But I do really enjoy being in spaces that the energy is clear. And a lot of commercial buildings, the energy in those buildings is virtually, I call diabolical. People complain about 5G coming, but any commercial building without 5G has a radiation level that's as bad as 5G. Are you there?
Why do you think that is, that the commercial buildings are more toxic than normal homes?
It is a really interesting fact that, and I know it, but I still want to do more research on exactly why. Okay, a lot of commercial buildings, like office spaces and things like that, tend to use fluorescent lighting. And I have a rule of thumb with fluorescent lighting is where it sheds light, it sheds radiation, so it can and create a charge throughout the entire building. Negative psychic impression, which is a form of bioplasmic radiation, is another reason why commercial buildings have a really dirty energy. That is, for example, we'll take you, we'll talk about Parliament House before. Who's in Parliament House? The politicians. What do we think of the politicians? Well, at the moment, considering everything's going down, there's a lot of angst towards the politicians, and that's directed at them personally, and that's called negative psychic impression, and that has a charge to it. Like, people might be skeptical about, human-generated radiation, but it's probably our biggest radiation danger or problem on the planet. When we're emotionally unstable, our emotional pain body is an energy field which is basically engulfs our biofield, and when we're emotionally down or angry or got something going on, we leak a charge, and that charge becomes an imprint in the space, or it can be directed at another location.
So the charge attaches to the object of our affection or aggression.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a good time to actually have a look at Canberra Parliament House in Canberra and show us what's happening there at the moment in energetic terms.
I'll just quickly pull Parliament House up on my Google Earth, which is pretty worn out by this time of the day because I spend virtually all day, every day, doing readings for people around the country and around the world. So if I go to Canberra, and Canberra also is the first city in Australia to get 5G, which is the 5G streetlights.
Is that right?
And we did our original 5G testing in a suburb called Dixon in Canberra last year.
All right.
So if you look at Parliament House, Canberra, wrong building. I don't know if you're
You can share it. How did you do
streaming
it?
it yourself, or if you're sharing the screen. If you look at Parliament House, it sits roughly 45 degrees. I think it's 30 degrees to the north, so it's not aiming north, south, east, west. It's got a big ring road around the outside. It has two big energy lines that cross through the centre. And there's two big energy lines that bound every corner. It's quite weird. Those energy lines are called fissures. So a fissure is a fault line in the ground, and it's under compression, and they have water in the bottom of them. And so a fissure is also a water vein, but fissures do cause cancer. I've done studies on groups of people who were cancer patients and looked at their home addresses, and every single one of them had fissures running under the house, causing a lot of earth radiation in the house, which is what they call geopathic stress caused in the body. So you've got this crossing through Parliament House, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bounding the outside of Parliament House. There's 2 geoclins in Parliament House, and the radiation is clear there. It's not a problem. There's no charge there. However, without the geoclins in Parliament House, Canberra, the energy is toxic, just like a commercial building, and more so because of the directed negative psychic impression. Not that I've got anything against politicians, federal politicians. We had some very, very good help with our local federal politician over a fraud issue a few years ago with someone trying to play funny buggers. I won't say what choice it was. And we got great help from our federal politician. I wouldn't think anything negative of him, but people around Australia have different opinions. And I've actually experienced something I saw from the air one day, and this is really weird. I was flying to Sydney from Melbourne, and often the top of the descent is over the top of Canberra, and I was able to see Parliament House on the ground from my seat, and you could almost see all these energy lines radiating into Parliament House. It was a really weird experience, and all those energy lines radiating into Parliament House were the negative psychic impression lines which are created when someone's got a beef against someone else. It was quite an interesting experience. I've not seen it again. Although when you look at Parliament House now, as just showing you do see these streets which tend to look like they're radiating in or out away from Parliament House. What I saw was actually something different.
Oh, is that right?
It's an interesting place, interesting building. There are actually a few geoclins in other government body buildings in Canberra. We had a phone call many years ago from a woman who said she worked with a group of men who she didn't like and said they were all quite sceptical and toxic people. And she bought a geoclin on the government credit card, and she wouldn't tell me where it was. And I finally worked out where it was, when I did a few expos in Canberra a few years ago. And our accommodation of one of those expos was actually up opposite the ACCC. It was in the ACCC building the geoclins was put. Quite funny.
So you could actually feel the geoclins where it was, even though you didn't know where it was.
Exactly. Like as an energy reader, once you learn to open up your intuitive skills and develop them, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, but you really fine tune them, and you get to a point that you'll be out and about and you'll inadvertently be reading different energies. It's not worrying me, it's just out of curiosity. And I remember being at this accommodation looking at this building over the road which had ACCC on it. I'm like, oh, that's the ACCC, that's great. Then I read the energy and I think, hang on, ACCC shouldn't have that energy because they're not popular with a lot of people too. And so then the penny dropped. That was that woman. Quite funny.
So what does you talked about the negative psychic impressions. What do the positive?
Well, that's love.
What do they feel like? more like, you know, I don't know, rainbow colors, nice warm feelings around your heart, sort of have exactly.
It's
like the kindergarten.
Yeah, it will stimulate meridians. It will stimulate your endocrine system. It will stimulate your triple warmer meridian. It will stimulate your heart meridian, your pericardial meridian, your circulation meridian. They're all feel-good things, if you know what I mean. It'll settle your adrenals down a bit, whatever's going on. That's good. That's positive psychic impression. And people who are very well connected will say, you know, I'm on the other side of the world, away from you, and I could feel your energy. Could feel you were thinking about me. That's a reality. Like, well, it's skeptics can say, oh, what a load of rubbish. But you know, what we feel is true. No one can actually deny that.
Mm. So for areas we were going back to radiation. We're talking about, you know, places like Hiroshima or places where there's been an explosion or a death. What is it that homeowners or workers can do?
Well, if you really want to be specific,
you know, there's two things they can do. One is they can buy a product.
Yeah, absolutely. Get a harmonizer.
What else can they do?
If you want to really, something like that, shielding doesn't work because the positive charge goes straight through it. I've known that for a long time, and trying to make a lot of people aware or be careful. Someone trying to sell you some curtain material to protect you from radio frequency, which is not harmful, for $2,000. Like, I'm quite critical about that. But if you want to talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and if you want to talk about Fukushima, there's a radiation imprint in those cities from the two bombs and the blast. And we've done experiments where people have had geocleansers in their houses in those cities, and they've removed them from the power point, so they're not actually active in the power point. And we've read those houses with Google Earth, and what actually happens is the geocleanser actually creates a hole in the radiation imprint that doesn't actually come back. It's quite interesting. The same thing happens in New Zealand. There's a lot of bioplasmic charge in the air of death and anger in New Zealand, which came from whatever happened with the Maoris a long, long time ago. It must have been pretty severe because the charge is really strong. And you use a harmonizer like a geocleanser, a stellar dome over there, and it removes that energetic imprint, which is a bioplasmic imprint. It's actually quite fascinating to see.
Hmm. So let's just talk more about, you know, the stellar dome. And you mentioned that there are like man-made crystals. They're actually artificial crystals that you put in there, and that's because crystals have a lattice structure, so they hold a certain frequency. I mean, how does it actually work to counter the positive radiation?
If you know, like, certain frequencies produce positive charge, certain frequencies produce a negative charge. I've also been building bioresonance equipment for myself. You're not allowed to sell it unless you're ratified by the TGA in Australia. But I've built bioresonance for myself, and I've done a lot of work with Leanne, my new wife, and some other people over the years where I can actually recognise what I call a sympathetic frequency. You just have to play the frequency, and I can tell whether it's harmful or beneficial. And over the years, I've discovered some very, very unique frequencies with it, which I actually keep to myself, which are embedded in the products in an infusion process during the manufacturing of the product. Once the product is completed, it holds that frequency forever. It can't lose its frequency. It doesn't deplete. It always resonates at that frequency.
So how did you discover these special frequencies? What happened?
Just from working with bioresonance and working with frequencies.
Right.
When I work with bioresonance, I use a frequency generator that allows me to use 16 tones or frequencies simultaneously. And my major number one set is made up of all sympathetic frequencies. And then, like some I could tell you about, like 333 is a really good frequency, 7.83 hertz, which is what I don't use, but I know is the frequency of the Schumann resonance, which is a sympathetic frequency, for example.
Thank you for that. That leads me to a question that one of my friends, he follows your channels, but he just asked me to ask this to you. So he says that Dr. Klinghardt said they did some testing on similar crystals on power lines into a chicken's shed. That he doesn't know which product it was, and the chickens did become the chicken became happier, less stressed, and laid more eggs, but their lifespan reduced substantially. So his comment was that some of these devices might make you feel better, but the radiation might still be doing damage. What would you say to that?
If you don't get the frequency right, it can. I wouldn't regard him as an expert on EMF too. I will say he does say that Wi-Fi causes mold, and I've been a building biologist for over 20 years, and there's nothing more wrong than that statement.
Okay.
I'm a bit shocked that a personality like that would want to mislead the public like that. I cringe every time I hear that. But yeah, what he was basically saying is how I interpret that is that there are good and bad frequencies, and there are frequencies that might sit in between, and you might have got a reaction out of the chickens, but the frequency in the end may have been booby-trapped and wasn't as clean as what you think, and in the end it would have then started to accumulate in the body and cause electromagnetic stress on an organ, which would accelerate the deterioration of that organ. I can see that. For example, Wilhelm Reich, who's the father of the term orgone, had a machine he called a orgone box, which he sat in, which was made up of layered material, which produced a frequency. And he said you can only be in there for a short period of time, and after that period of time, you had to get out. What he was saying between the lines is that the frequency of his orgone box was in sympathy with the human body, but there was something not quite right with the frequency. So half an hour is great, but get out after half an hour because one of your organs will start to come under a great electromagnetic load.
Yeah, and I've heard that from a friend who was actually a Melbourne Dowse as well, Erica Lane, and she often got asked to go to houses and test them. And she's actually mentioned that one of the things she found was that SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, was often linked to the house sitting on a ley line where there was actually too much energy for the human.
No, that's wrong. Ley lines are sympathetic. They have a gorgeous energy, and they can't kill anything. What can cause SIDS is if you've had a death on a property, or someone's died in the house, and it's been a really severe, nasty, murdered type of death, and there's lots of them in Australia from what the English did to the Aboriginals a couple hundred years ago. Then you have an imprint from the death, and if it's, as I said, a really nasty death, the intensity of the imprint will be stronger, and you'll have a bioplasmic charge, which is like 4 or 5G throughout the whole house. And then on top of that, you'll have what I call an activated grid line coming up out of the ground, because the instance of the death causes the geomagnetic field in the Earth's crust in the vicinity of the house, and that activates another grid of Earth radiation lines, which are quite harmful. I'll give you a really good example. It's not a SIDS death. My oldest daughter, when she was first born, she would have been only weeks old. When she was born, I was in my early 20s. We were living in a house which, on the land, someone had been murdered in the 1920s. And the bedroom, which was the room where she was first put into when she first came from hospital, was right next to the kitchen. And that room was directly over the spot where the guy was murdered. And I used to go into that room back then, and I knew nothing about what I do now, and feel really sick. Well, we had a day where I was at work, and my wife at the time, Amanda, was in the kitchen doing something, which was right next to that bedroom. And Michaela, my newborn daughter at the time, in the cot, started making some noises, as in, she was in trouble breathing and choking and things like that. Amanda rushed into the room and just in the nick of time picked her up and revived her. She was turning blue in the face. That almost was a SIDS, and I attribute that to the imprint of the energy of the death in that bedroom. We also had ghost activity in that house. I used to suffer sleep paralysis attacks, which is something which is common for a lot of people when there's been a death in a property. Amanda, my wife at the time, would actually see the ghost in the doorway. We had a ceiling fan and a wood heater in the house, and you know those fans have a switch that goes click, click, click. It's not an easy, smooth thing. Yep. And we'd turn them off at night time, and I'd wake up at 2 in the morning, and the house would be freezing, and I'd walk out, and the ceiling fan would be turned on, and the fan and the wood heater would be turned on, so the wood heater had gone cold, or blowing out cold air. And you're from Queensland, you don't know how cold it is in Melbourne in the winter time. There's nothing worse than an air conditioner in the winter time in Melbourne. So we had some interesting ghosty activity in our house. Hence, not really because of those instances, with the geoclines and the stellidome, there's programs in there and frequencies to actually remove the bioplasmic radiation from the death and remove the imprint from the death and remove the danger. And as far as I know, they're the only products in the world that do that, because those types of radiation are the worst types of radiation you can get. And in my consultancy work, it's not for looking at Wi-Fi or electrical radiation, things like that, or smart meters. It's always when there's been a death on the property and there's activity in the house and someone's being upset by it, or they've seen something like ghosty activity, which has caused huge emotional stress, or there's people living in the house who've got illnesses they just can't recover from.
Well, you see that all the different religions, don't they? So in Tibet and all that stuff, you know, where they haven't got any earth to actually bury them, they take them up onto the rocky ledge and they start to disarm and break them all up. The vultures. Yeah, so this is only in the place of the death where the death actually occurs. When they take the body away, the body's still giving off a charge, like an emotional pain body charge, but the body's dead. So if you want another really bad place to go energetically, just go wander through a cemetery. What, after the event or?
Or a hospital, yeah.
After the person's died, Jeff, yeah.
Well, how many people die in hospitals?
You've died.
Nursing homes, you know, all that death energy, and people don't know how to die. Like, I read a lot of Hare Krishna books written by Prabhupada and a lot of Kriya Yoga books. I read, there's a lot of stuff about meditation. I read the Tibetan book of Living and Dying, a phenomenal book. Teaches you how to die. And if we knew how to die, we wouldn't leave death imprints, because that way of dying is leading through the fontanelle, and there's no emotional pain body charge. So, for example, you know, Paramahansa Yogananda, who's a famous Kriya Yoga monk, died in 1957 or something. When he died, he didn't deteriorate. They kept him in a glass coffin for 27 days, and they poked and prodded him to see and smelt him to see if there was any mold, as if he was still alive. Where they buried him, his crypt had a gorgeous energy, and even his masters in India, in Puri, when they died, they all died the same way. It's like an art, so to speak.
Hey, Karen. Sorry, go.
Okay, yeah. So before we die, can we talk about 5G? Because that's what everybody's worried about, killing us.
Oh no, because that's a major imprint, isn't it? Parapsychology. I mean,
do you want to talk about 5G?
Yes, please.
Okay. There's two types of 5G. And not many people know this. The telcos were a little bit sketchy how they got this information over. And the first type of 5G, which is the one that's really dangerous, which was in Canberra, is in the streetlights. So they're the LED streetlights with a little blue cone that hangs down below them. And in some places in Australia, like in Adelaide, their 5G streetlights don't have any visible antennas. So those antennas are in the streetlights or on every street pole. So what they do is they go into a whole suburb and they deck out the whole suburb, and they put these other devices, so one on every 4 or 5 street poles. That's it. And I'm not a technician, and I've asked Telstra and Optus, can you tell me what that is? And they go, we don't know. they don't know nothing. That, I think, is a repeater. So if you've got your streetlights plus this device, then you know you've got 5G turned on. So what that does is all these streetlights, which are microcell antennas, create a geomagnetic field in Earth's crust in the entire suburb where all these streetlights are set up. And what occurs there is a radiation charge that comes up out of the ground to about 5 feet above the ground. And 5G is not the only thing that will do that. High solar winds, Mercury Retrograde, and someone dying in a property and commercial building radiation all have the same thing in common. So that charge that comes out of the ground, when it gets to a building, it fully engulfs the building. It activates those other really dangerous Earth radiation lines, any ley line, which is a really healthy, balanced, radiant energy line. Those ley lines are completely wiped out. And the planetary flow of energy, which is really important for keeping us, our mindfulness and equanimity and happy. And the planetary flow goes from east to west and north to south during the day, and it reverses at night time. Well, the 5G in the 5G area, that reverses, and that really plays on people's hormones, neurotransmitters, and emotions. We did our testing in Canberra February last year, because before we said anything on our website about 5G, we wanted to make sure that we had gone to a true 5G area, done our testing. We took an independent kinesiologist. He did the kinesiology testing. I did the biotensor testing. We tested and tested and tested with and without products. Videoed the whole lot, then put it on our website and wrote blogs about it. I know there are some of those, my competitors out there, especially those who mentioned the word scalar, are claiming the 5G, and I've tested all those things, and they don't neutralise the 5G. People are being misled. And it's a really big problem, because if you're using something and you still got the radiation having an effect on your body, your body's being worn out and worn down. So that's a dangerous form of 5G. But what I call the not so dangerous form of 5G are 5G antennas, which are on 4G towers. And there's 4G towers aren't as close together as streetlights. They might be 2 or 3 kilometres apart, depending on where you are. And a 4G tower, which then becomes a 5G tower, its radiation field is a geomagnetic field that goes through the ground and extends out to 80 metres roughly away from and around the tower. So if you put yourself or build a house within 80 metres of a tower, then the whole house is going to be engulfed in a radiation charge, which is really, really dangerous. However, beyond 80 metres, the radio frequency wave is only a wave. It's harmless. It doesn't cause any electromagnetic stress in the body. I know there's people out there who would disagree with that, but if you work on an energetic level, and if you understand how to read people's energy, you'll then understand that the radio frequency wave is actually doing nothing, and good kinesiology or a bioresonance machine will actually prove that too. Those 5G towers are good, so-called, for only 5G mobile phones, and the range of how far away from the tower you can get coverage is nowhere near as far as what the 4G will give you. But I bought a 5G phone a few weeks ago to do my initial testing on just the phones themselves, and when I'm in a 5G area, I jump on YouTube and do all sorts of things on the 5G phones. If I'm given a plug, I am brilliant. It's so fast. I can't believe how good they are. Optus tell me that with the towers and those 5G zones, sorry, the area the towers produce the 5G, where you can pick 5G up, getting late at night. They say that you can't use it for home broadband, which is 5G broadband, which is what you can use in the 5G zones where the streetlights are. However, I've been onto the Optus map and checked some addresses which are close to the 5G towers, and it does say it's okay for 5G home broadband. And 5G home broadband is, if you use a harmonizer like a Geoclins or a Stelladome, it makes it safe, and it's going to be phenomenal for a lot of people, a lot of families, even myself. Like our factory in Somerville, we get NBN, and it's woeful, it's hopeless. We're just waiting, begging for the 5G to come so we can get a greater speed, which gives us greater productivity. There's nothing worse than trying to process 20 or 30 invoices through a accounting package in the morning, getting ready for a lunchtime pickup from eParcel, and your internet's going as slow as a wet week.
Tell me, on that dome,
So
would you put that in your ceiling, in your roof of your house? Would that
no, with the stellar dome, you just have to have it on a table or sitting on the floor in the corner or something like that.
True.
Leanne, everywhere she goes, she just has it in her handbag, and she doesn't take it out of the handbag. We developed it back in January last year, and we did some testing in Sydney while we were there for Sydney Mind, Body, Spirit, while you could go into state in May last year, and we were staying at Darling Square, I think it was Darling Square Novotel. And when we got there, Leanne didn't take the dome out of the handbag, she just left it in there. I went downstairs while she was doing something else and had a drink in the bar, actually. And while I was in the bar, I thought, gee, the energy is actually really good in here. That dome's really working in a great area over a big distance, or throughout the whole building. That was, I think, a 9-level building. So I pulled my phone out and checked the energy of the building using Google Earth. So I did a little Google Earth reading on the building within the building, so to speak. And it had covered the whole building, and it was like, wow, that's very interesting. And that's, that's the beauty of that, is that you can have it on your body, and every building you go into, you clear it of charge, you clear it of exactly the type of radiation which is going to interfere with your meridians, organs, glands, hormones, neurotransmitters, and so on.
So for us humans, we're often found, going for a surf and getting the negative ions, or actually going through a rainforest.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you go out into the bush, as long as everything's energetically in balance too, because you could go out into the bush in an area where there's been a lot of not so nice things happen to the Aboriginals. That's a couple of hundred years ago, and you'll have a big bioplasmic charge. If you don't have that, the bush produces a really nice, pleasant negative charge. I tend to use the word negative charge rather than negative ion. And some trees, especially some fir trees out of Europe, produce a negative charge field around them because they don't have leaves, they have needles. And if you know what a negative ion generator is, it's an electrical device that splits the ions off the end of needles. Negative ion generators are good, but they're only very limited. They only do small areas. Geoclins or a stellar dome does the same as a negative ion generator, as in how it feels, but will cover the whole building, not just one room.
I've been up in Scandinavia, they all have negative ion generators because of the winter seasons there, where they're in how, like in the office buildings.
Yeah, I can understand that, because they spend all day inside, and they would be using heating. The heating may be producing a lot of positive charge, and the negative ion generator just balances it.
Yeah.
Mind you, in the winter, out in the snow, because of the colour and the geometry of every little snowflake, that environment produces a beautiful negative charge. And a lot of things we look at, we recognise.
So that explains why it was still so wonderful when it snowed overnight in Europe, and you just walk out and it's so fresh.
Yeah. Yep. It really is enlivening. Your senses are enlivened because your meridians are being boosted with all this really nice energy, and your organs are operating at the right energy level, and the happy hormones are going, the happy neurotransmitters are going, and it looks really good too. And what you look at does play on how you feel. That's how I do my Google Earth readings. I'm using my eyes intuitively to read the energy. And like as that, you had that photo before of me at an expo many years ago. I'm sitting at my desk doing a reading for a woman. I sit there all day long and probably do 50 or 60 readings, and that's 50 or 60 houses which are really, really toxic. By the end of the day, it's like, oh, give me something nice to look at, if you know what I mean.
So what do you look at then?
Sorry?
So if you needed like a top up, would you just then go on and look at a picture of, I don't know, Niagara Falls or or snow?
Yeah,
snow?
it's really. My wife, Leanne. No, I won't say no. It's funny because sometimes I'll come across a house that has a really nice ley line through it, and ley lines can vary in width. If it's one of what I call the 25-kilometre grid, which is a grid of ley lines that run through Stonehenge, for example. If there's that I'm looking at, I usually make a comment to people like, "Oh boy, you know, thanks for this, because I've been reading Toxic Houses all day long, and I'm getting relief from your lovely energy house."
So I know that you've been covering Mercury retrograde and monitoring that for because I think I mean everybody knows that we go crazy, but perhaps you're the man to explain why.
Because when we have Mercury retrograde, we also have a situation where the charge in the air from the retrograde, whatever's going on, creates a situation where the Earth's crust becomes a geomagnetic field, which creates radiation coming out of the ground. And like we're in retrograde at the moment, and there were some days from like last Friday I did the retrograde webinar, and there were some days during last week where the charge coming out of the ground was 3.5 meters above the ground. Well, 5G only comes up 1.5 meters out of the ground. So the Mercury retrograde energy is a radiation energy where everyone is basically under severe geopathic stress, which has an effect on endocrine glands, hormones, neurotransmitters, initially affecting meridians, also have an effect on the respiratory system too. And if we breathe deeply, you look at what they call pranayama. That's a trigger for meditation for actually becoming peaceful and relaxed. And if your respiratory system is being interfered with, you're not going to do that. It's going to, as what I say, interfere with what I call your God connection above your head.
Okay, well, so that might explain the sudden surge in COVID cases, because we had Mercury retrograde and respiratory stress at the same time.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, that one, because there is a supposed link between COVID-19 and 5G, but I don't believe that. And this all comes from Wuhan, and the 5G I know in Wuhan wasn't the streetlight 5G; it was on the towers. And the energy in China, in Wuhan, the bioplasmic charge is like New Zealand for certain reasons. And so in Wuhan, when they turned the 5G on, they would have gone, "Oh wow, we can get 5G with our phones. How good's that?" They wouldn't have been going, "Oh, I feel terrible because of the 5G," because it was already pretty bad.
So the collective consciousness kind of can make or break.
Exactly.
Or the collective consciousness can actually cancel out the actual radiation effect of the technology. Because you were saying that people were more likely to just go, "Oh, this is 5G, I can get on the phone," versus the actual 5G radiation effect harming them. So they cancelled each other out. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you look at, let's be realistic. No one likes to be oppressed. Everyone's really annoyed that we're being oppressed at the moment, like we're living in a communist country, really. To be frank, no one likes to be oppressed and treated really badly. And when that goes on for a prolonged period of time, the people get really pissed off, and that creates a negative psychic impression, emotional pain, body charge, energy. And over a long period of time, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and then it accumulates until it covers the whole country. Like, as I said, New Zealand's bad for it, for the history, and it's not their fault now. That doesn't belong to them, actually. South Africa, because of apartheid and everything, that's a really bad one for it. There are some European countries that suffered really badly through the First and Second World War, have that bioplasmic charge in the air. And in Brazil, things aren't great there too, and there's a lot of people very unhappy there. Yeah. And it occurs there also. Not so much in Australia. We're pretty lucky in a sense. There are pockets of Australia where what happened to the Aboriginals after that happened, those who survived were quite annoyed and quite depressed about it. And there are some pockets of Australia that have a bioplasmic charge over whole towns or sections of countryside, but not everywhere. We're very lucky, actually, because in New Zealand or China, those really nice, healthy, radiant ley lines don't exist, or they can't punch through their energy because they've always been suppressed by the positive charge of the bioplasmic radiation.
Just talking about that, but also bringing the paranormal. You know, when we had the Bali bombings and we lost 88
Yep.
from that, the Balinese came in and they went through this massive cleansing and preparation and moved the fallen through spiritually, etherically. But then our civilization likes to every year remember them and put a monument up to acknowledge it. And it's almost like they come every year as a token of perpetuating. And it's almost like they bring back that energy again, whereas the Balinese was all about the cleansing and release and let go and allow them to move forward. It seems to be a bit of a contradiction.
It's interesting. I don't think actually it's a hard one to answer what it'd be like. I'd have to go and read it. Because you don't know what the Balinese were doing was enough to clear it. Because from the bombings there would be a very, very strong bioplasmic charge, because a lot of those people may not have died straight away. It would have been severe injuries, which from the time of the injury till the time of death would have been terrifying, absolutely terrifying for people, which would have left there an even stronger charge. So I'd have to go to I'd do it with Google Earth, find the building and read it from there. A lot of rituals for clearing energy, some work and some don't. Like a common one is saging. And I go to a lot of houses where people there's been deaths in the houses, and the owners or the occupants of the house are aware of something that's not right. And they'll sage, and the smoke has a nice aroma and frequency, and it does increase the energy. But once the aroma goes away and the smoke goes away, everything goes back to what it was. And I find that with people who say they go into houses and wave their hands around and talk to the ghosts and clear the energy, and they're being quite serious about what they do because they're quite in-tuned people. But every time I read them, the bioplasmic charge is still there. The understanding of the bioplasmic charge from the death is not something that's common knowledge. I had to learn that myself over years and learn how to recognise it.
I remember having a great discussion with the Archbishop of a mainstream church, and he was explaining to me how to create holy water and then go in and bless houses and bless children and bless those souls that were still there, just using blessed water. I take it.
Yep.
That's
that house I lived in my early 20s. We actually had the local Anglican priest there, and he did that. He did the holy water and everything, but it didn't remove the entity. It was really funny. The entity activity really died down, but it came back. And I knew that from the countless sleep paralysis attacks I'd encounter at 11:30 at night time. A sleep paralysis attack is where you're lying there and you're having a really bad dream. All of a sudden, in that dream, you wake up and you can't breathe. You feel like you've got someone sitting on your chest, and you're paralyzed too. And within seconds, you come good. And at first, when it happens, you go, "What the hell happened?" But with me, after a while, I realised what it was. Many years ago, I used to do ghost adventures, and one year we did a ghost tour with a group down at Cape Otway Lighthouse. And after the tour, I decided to stay the night in the lighthouse keeper's quarters, which had been turned into a B&B. And Cape Otway Lighthouse is famous for all the shipwrecks and all the people who climbed up the cliff face after the wrecks and died in the area around the lighthouse and the lighthouse keeper's quarters. Anyway, that night I decided to sleep there. I had 5 sleep paralysis attacks, And every time it happened, I was waking up with a wet, hairy head right there. It was like long, wavy hair. And it would last, I'd be conscious of it for a few seconds and it would just disappear. It would, like a bad dream, but I could feel the wet hair on my face. I got out of there really quickly about 5 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to wait until it was light before I drove out because I was a little bit spooked at the time.
Yeah. So what did you do, you know, in your home where that was happening to put a stop?
Oh, that was back in the late mid 80s. We ended up moving out of there and into another house where someone had died, but we didn't have any activity. But we had really big problems with my son, who was only a baby at the time, with yeah, that's it, Cape Otway Lighthouse, with sleeping issues. You know, if you've got a not so nice radiation charge energy in your house, it's going to have an effect on how well you sleep. And a lot of people say to me that they wake up between 1 and 3 in the morning by something, because if you've got an entity in the house, the activity is greater at night time than during the daytime. The energy is more toxic at night time than the daytime. And your liver detoxes between 1 and 3 in the morning, so it's actually triggering something in your liver to make you wake up. It's an extremely common complaint.
You know, I'll just bring up the map of Australia.
Do you reckon?
Go, Julie.
Yep.
Sorry, Jeff, come again?
I'll just bring up the map of Australia.
Yep.
So when you start looking at the geopathic stress, and we have cultures that talk about song lines, ley lines, energy lines, your forte would sort of bring that clearly into focus, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, song lines is something that I've looked at a lot in the past. I'm in Frankston, so we're at the beginning of the Mornington Peninsula. It had a big Aboriginal history, good and bad, and I've experienced some of the song lines. They have a beautiful energy, just like the ley line, because they were created by the frequency of their voices. If you know how, you can actually create your own song line. I'll give you a really good example of that. I'm not boasting either, but Leanne, my new wife, I have to say, when I first met her, was a jazz singer, and she was a really good jazz singer, a beautiful voice, and she sung beautiful songs too. Anyway, we had a situation where we visited a venue where she had sung a concert in the month beforehand, and when she'd sung, because she's standing in a microphone that's fixed, she would be standing in the one place all the time. And she had created, and this is what we found later on, is wherever she sung at a concert and stood, she actually created a negative charge imprint from her voice frequency, which is similar to a song line. Another way you can get it is with what they call a birth imprint, which is the opposite to a death imprint. The birth imprint's probably, you know, that round. And a birth imprint is the actual place where someone has given birth to a child. And the Aboriginals go birth out on the land, here, there, and everywhere. And often in my consultancy work, especially for the properties in an area which is more country, more rural, I'll look for the birth imprints if there are any there, and I'll point them out to the owners and say, look, this is a good spot. Not everything's bad.
Well, the Aborigines ladies have an area set aside for the birthing tree.
Yep. And if you were able to experience the energy of that tree or that area, it'd be fantastic. It's like the Aboriginals have these things called borers. I know there's one on the Gold Coast if you're heading from Burleigh towards Surface, and it's on the right-hand side around near the Burleigh area. There's a borer there, and the borer is a large area about the size of this is probably about the size of a tennis court. And it just looks like a little bit of parkland, but I don't know what they did in the borers, but the energy is just magnificent. Very similar to a song line.
But if you find one, there's always the second one close by.
Yeah, it may be, yeah. And this borer's got just a pine rail fencing around the outside. It looks like it's a small ice skating rink, but just an indentation in the ground and short grass.
Right. Okay. Hey, the members of their family call you their doctor? Doctor Who? Which doctor? Come on, like, sort us out.
Sorry?
You get many of your family and friends who call you the Doctor Who or witch doctor, or they have their
No.
innuendos there. They, Joshua.
No, they've gotten used to it after 20-something years. At first, I was like, "What are you? What do you want about?" But they get used to it because a lot of it's not out there. It's all common sense and logic and the knowledge I've built up over the years, and I get a bit more respect from the family members now. At first, they were like, "You're crazy." And when I first started making harmonisers, when I first left a job where I was working in a job to support myself while I was doing the harmonisers on the side or on the weekend and things like that, everyone said, "You've got to be kidding me, who's going to buy radiation harmonisers?" I proved them all wrong, because the awareness of radiation in the last 12 to 14 years has been quite exponential. However, what I don't like seeing is the exponential growth of what I call armchair experts on radiation, people who've got no idea what they're talking about, who read or watch stuff on the internet from people who are not qualified to really give an opinion. And then you've got this Chinese whisper type of setup going on, and people got all these weird, crazy ideas of what is and what isn't and what does and doesn't work, which is founded. In the very beginning, it was really interesting. People were fascinated. But in the beginning, there wasn't the amount of, YouTube. Well, back then, YouTube wasn't even in existence. The internet was used for gaining knowledge in general areas. There wasn't a lot of knowledge about EMF or anything like that around.
Actually, can I just ask, because a lot of my friends are, both into gardening and also into sacred geometry. There's a lot of interest, around Nikola Tesla and, building pyramids or octahedrons and stuff like that in the building. Do you find that makes a difference?
It depends. Like, there's some sacred geometry which is not very good at all. For example, the flower of life pattern. People who don't know believe it's a really nice energy pattern, but the flower of life pattern is actually really toxic. Someone's done something, I reckon, radionically to it to lock it up so it doesn't do whatever it's supposed to do. Pyramids are a no-go. I learned that a long time ago. If you really study pyramids and experience pyramids, what a pyramid does is it creates a negative charge which goes up the top. It doesn't radiate out. So buildings with pyramid roofs and things like that aren't energetically correct. And the underside of the pyramid creates a really dangerous energy inside. And I know that for a fact because a long time ago, I built myself a copper pyramid to meditate under. And after 20 minutes, I come out with a rotten headache. And I ended up cutting that into pieces about that long. I realised I learned what it was actually doing. And then I experienced some interesting pyramid energies at a building in Melbourne called the Shrine, which is a shrine to all those who died in the First and Second World Wars. And the shrine has a pyramid roof, and you can actually walk up to what they call the gallery, which runs around the outside of that pyramid roof. That you're walking up the inside, up the stairwell of the pyramid, and as you're walking up the stairs, it feels like the air's being sucked out of your lungs because you're in that space of underneath. Same thing happens.
It's creating a vacuum.
Yeah, it's not very nice at all. My favourite shape really is dome. Like, I've done a lot of research into domes and dome roof buildings, and take, for example, your average mosque has a dome roof, and the energy in a mosque is a spiritual energy. It has a negative charge. Take another building in Washington called what's the building? It's not the White House, it's the Capitol building. It's got the big dome roof on it.
Oh, yeah. Bit like
we all know what goes on there.
Cathedral,
We all know the type of people who congregate there. So naturally, the negative psychic impression there would be terrible, but because of that dome roof, it creates a radiance in there, like there's a GeoCleanse or one of my products in there. I also found another city somewhere in the Middle East, in some desert somewhere, called the City of Domes. And it's an ancient city where all the houses, and they may have been mud brick houses, all had dome roofs. And when you read the image of all those houses, they've all got a really nice spiritual, really nice, light, healthy, radiant energy.
Hey, let me just recap back to what you said about the flower of life, because I know a lot of the listeners might sort of go, oh yeah. Can you sort of explain what is wrong with the flower of life? What does it do energetically that you don't approve of?
It creates a positive charge. And I know what you mean. I was doing a talk up at Canberra a few years ago, and I had 40 people to talk on, and someone asked me about the flower of life, and I just told it as it is. It's not what you say, like you think. It's got some real problems with it. And people were aghast. You're like, what do you mean? You know, I've got this T-shirt with flower of life. It's going to kill me. But I was actually able to demonstrate it too, using the biotensor, by the way the biotensor reacts to the energy from it. But I think if you look at what the flower of life, its origins and what it's all about, it is a really good thing. It's just that someone somehow, somewhere, is like sending a negative psychic impression, which is possible, to every flower of life image everywhere. It sounds ludicrous, but understanding how energy can be transmitted, there's a huge possibility for it.
So it could be hijacked.
It could be hijacked. Like I use, that's called a torus, that image. And that's different to a flower of life. And I use that because I've been using it for years, and use that torus image used with my products. One amplifies, or one amplifies the other. They work in synergy together. And that torus image is a very good energy image. And it's mimicked in nature. You look at a sunflower close up, it's a torus pattern. All the stamens, we call them in the middle, it's a torus pattern. There are torus patterns in a lot of nature. We even bought what is it? It's a glass bowl for holding fruit. So it's a flat platter with a stem. And it's got a torus type of pattern embedded in it, etched into it. Well, it's a casting of glass anyway. And when Leanne brought it home, she said, "Oh, look at this! It's really nice. Can you, can you feel the energy?" I'm looking at this glass bowl, going, "Wow, this is really good. That glass bowl's energy is going to promote good, healthy fruit, because fruit and vegetables like to be in a negative charge environment."
Julia? Oh, okay. You back?
So, are there any questions from?
No, they're all listening.
I can't see.
So, yeah, you've got some really attentive students there. I mean, I'm sure any teacher who's in a classroom would relish such a quiet bunch of students.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Hey? No, it's good. Hey, there's a building in Yatala in southern parts of Brisbane, in Logan, Gold Coast there. It's on Computer Avenue, and it's a huge big building. I think it's Clough, which is a software manufacturer, and they've gone and put a Faraday cage around their external part of their building. Yeah. So this image here is of a Faraday cage, and generally speaking, it was all our intelligence organizations, well before the internet came along, all had their little Faraday cages where they used to have their briefings and talk about things, without being spied on or listened to.
Yep.
So effectively, what you're really saying is that, can they do away with the Faraday cage if they work with some of the devices that you've got?
No, see, a Faraday cage stops radio frequency, which is a wave, but a Faraday cage always has charge within it, so they're actually quite dangerous. And they're using it to stop from being eavesdropped. while they're in the Faraday cage, they're under a huge amount of electromagnetic stress, and also the building would have that commercial building radiation charge in it anyway. And the Faraday cage wouldn't stop the charge, but it does stop the eavesdropping and the radio frequency. So basically, if you were outside of Faraday cage and if you used a radio frequency meter, you would get a reading, high or low, depending on what's going on. And inside the cage, supposedly you would get no reading at all. But it's not, Faraday cage doesn't mean it's actually going to be have an energy which is going to be in sympathy with the human body.
Right. I'm going to say something that I was not supposed to say, but it was about 12 years ago. Contractors were assigned a specialized role for BAE engineering systems to work on stealth planes, and they were working on 38G frequencies for micro linkages. So the major computer was going out to all these linkages so that they could fly the craft, which is like delta wing, at high altitude and be in stealth mode. And that was so we're over, it's 12 years, 14 years, and they're working on 38G frequencies. So I'm quite sure now they must be working on substantially higher frequencies than those, and we're just dealing with the low end.
Regardless of what the number of G it is, it's all going to create charge. Like people say to me, oh, this frequency, that frequency, X megahertz, this X megahertz, that. People shouldn't really take that on and try and work it out. It just means that if you're within a certain distance of what's the emitter or the tower or whatever it is, the equipment that's creating it, within a certain distance close to it, you are under danger of electromagnetic stress. If you want to talk,
when they're sending that frequency, they've also got a carrier wave and a sub-carrier wave where they can actually come down on, can't they? I mean, that's...
Come down, sorry?
Well, they can send a sub-carrier wave down on that frequency where they can send a message through. Like in the old days when Channel 7 had teletext, so you'd be on that frequency for television, and then you could hit the teletext, and then you get the stream coming through at the bottom.
Yeah.
So they were using the same carrier wave as Channel 7's frequency, but they were using the sub-carrier wave to get their messaging through.
Yeah.
Is dealing with those high-end frequencies, sending through a sub-carrier wave with a message in it, would that have major impact on our own human frequencies and our own micro linkages that interface with our own brain?
Were there in that environment where the technology was there. If you want to talk military and things like that, I found something a few years ago that occurs in major airports and major airports only, and it was a radiation charge that we couldn't explain. But only recently we worked out what that charge was, and it was actually a geomagnetic frequency, which was geomagnetic, which was caused by the radar at the airports.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a counter frequency for that in our products. We've had it in there for a few years, which neutralizes that and nothing else does. All this equipment is using high amounts of energy, of electricity, and they're using some pretty fancy frequencies to do different things. And so the radar was creating a frequency through the ground, which would come up out of the ground and cause all sorts of dramas, which was completely different to anything else around. So you can get, like, for example, Mercury Retrograde has a different frequency to solar winds, which has a different frequency to what you get from bioplasmic radiation when there's been a death on the property, which is different to the radar. And I've had to work out that some of those geomagnetic charge frequencies are easily neutralized and some had to be targeted and are quite specialized. It's a bit like, I'll give you a really good example. The most dangerous appliance in any house is the digital TV. And when digital TV came out, our GeoCleanse at the time didn't neutralize what comes from the digital TV, so we had to find a counter frequency for it. And what digital TV does is, if that's your TV screen and you're facing that direction, it creates a radiation beam the size and shape of the screen in front of it, and that can go up to 150 meters.
150 meters?
Most people sit in front, well, you want to sit generally in front of your digital TV, thinking that, 44 channels of rubbish are going to make you feel better, but you're actually being quite dangerously harmed by the radiation charge. It's interesting too, because when digital TV first started coming out, I did get a lot of phone calls from people saying, "Oh, come to my house, something's changed. I don't know what it is. I feel really terrible." And they'd all bought digital TVs.
When you get those lenses, can they negate that?
I actually don't believe that the blue light's a problem. And that's another one made up by very influential people who are designed to manipulate the population for an agenda. I won't name any names we did before. I reckon it's the telecommunications industry using the blue light to cover up for their radiation issues. If you're sitting all night long, like they talk about kids with their iPads or their mobile phones, communication, Facebooking or whatever all night long, holding their devices which are transmitting to and fro, they're under a huge amount of electromagnetic stress. That's causing the dramas. Don't hang the blue light. With my bioresonance work, we use light colour therapy, and blue is a great colour for balancing hormones and for balancing other types of energies in the body, which is discordant. Like biophoton energy can be good or bad, but it's only bad because of what's behind it. Which is the positive, whether there's a positive charge from behind it or there's a negative charge behind it.
So you're saying 150 meters from the TV, 150 meters.
Sorry? Yeah, okay. I've measured up to 150 meters, and over the years it's actually changed, which means what's going on here.
Well, how would it be in units and high-rise apartments?
Oh, terrible. Well, like what I think's worse is, younger generations these days, when they go to buy a new house, end up in a housing estate where you put your hand out your window and you're putting your hand through the window of the next door neighbour. It's so close together. And especially if the elevation is quite flat, everyone's TV beams are going through everyone else's houses. And these days, like when I was a kid, you had one TV in the house, it was black and white. Nowadays, people tend to have a TV in every bedroom, in the kitchen, in the lounge room. They might have 3 living areas, so there's TVs everywhere. Now, people complain about being able to pick up their neighbour's microwave, their neighbour's Wi-Fi listing on their computers when they go to use their internet, thinking that the neighbour's Wi-Fi is going to be an EMF danger. It's no way. It's not. It can't be. That's not the problem. The problem for TV being able to actually penetrate from one space to another.
So you best stop turning off on the wall, eh? TV.
Sorry?
You best stop.
If you unplug the TV, that energy beam when the TV is turned off is still there. It's an imprint. It's an electromagnetic imprint. It's like a microwave creates an electromagnetic imprint in front of it, in front of the door, which extends a metre out in front of it, the size and shape of the screen. If you're living in a really old house with really old power points and really old electrical system, chances are that every power point will create a imprinted field around them, which extend out 2 metres all the way around. My last house that we lived in was a 1940s built Cape Cod house up the road, and it had some very, very old power points in there, which I used to use for testing different devices, because these power points created big radiation fields. To me, it was actually a bonus to have those dangerous power points or energetically dangerous power points in the house, because I could play with them, if you know what I mean.
Of course, yeah. So you're not a proponent for taking mobile phones to your bedroom at night?
Well, if you're going to harmonise on your phone, it's not a problem. Your phone, when it's not in call, if you're not touching it, isn't really doing much. Like I sometimes get people say, "Oh, I must be feeling sick," or my mobile phone, which is on my bedside table, is making me sick. No, it's the mobile phone radiation, the distance from the phone, even when in call, isn't that great. However, there is one aspect from a phone, whereas if the tower's over there, and if your phone's there, when you're on the call, if that tower there is the tower that the phone's communicating with, you get an energy beam going from the phone to the tower. There's a name for that, and they talk about that with 5G. The name's just gone from my head. It'll come back later. And that's a problem, because if you're in a crowd and if there are people using phones, you could have their phones, if everyone's standing up, their beams from their phones, which are going back to the tower, going through your brain. I have a standard for testing mobile phone radiation harmonizers where I get a phone in call, I hold it out at arm's length in call, and I move around 360 degrees and make sure it's at head height. And if the harmonizer on the phone is working, that beam is neutralized and will stop it from having an effect on your brain. If it is not working properly, that beam will still be existent with a positive charge and will go straight through your head, and you will actually feel it. The brain's a really good resonant cavity for picking up on different frequencies.
Well, that makes me very happy that I invested in mobile phone harmonizers after I met you, and I made sure that the kids got more, even when they lost their phones. We've got one or two questions from Kay Wood. So she's saying, Gerard, I have two GeoCleanse devices. Are they okay if they're both used in the house in different locations?
Yeah, they are.
That's
a really, really common question. And we've actually gone and tested that ourselves, two GeoCleanses in one home. It doesn't have any greater effect in the house. However, when you have a GeoCleanse, it sends a frequency through the wire into your meter box, and then it sends it back out to the street power to your closest power pole. Then the GeoCleanse will neutralize the radiation on the power lines for 50 meters up and down the street in either direction. And that's a good thing. What we found with two GeoCleanses in the house is that direction up and down the street that the GeoCleanse neutralizes with the power points, that actually doubles in size. And where that comes into play is where when they bring 5G streetlights scenario in, the GeoCleanse will protect the house from that. And because it's neutralising the power lines up and down the street, it will, in a sense, take out more power lines, more of the power lines or more of the 5G energy further and further away from the house. So it will benefit the neighbours too. And it is often asked because we've been making GeoCleanses since 2004, and what we made in the beginning is completely different in its performance to now due to the amount of awareness we have and then being able to act upon on what we pick up with our awareness in changing the programs and the frequency for the GeoCleanse. So you're going to have people who had one they bought 10 years ago, hear about the new changes, and they'll buy a new one. And they'll say, what do I do with the old one? So we went and did the testing ourselves to answer that question.
So Kay was asking, she got the updated GeoCleanse around 2014. Have you updated it to a better one that's more powerful than the one she has?
Yeah, we did. In 2016, roughly, we did our research and testing and awareness around what happens with the geomagnetic field effect when we had very, very high solar winds, and we made a change for that. About 18 months later, we made another change for the same thing that occurs with Mercury Retrograde, because they're two different frequencies caused, even though they do the same thing. So what a lot of people do these days is, instead of getting a second GeoCleanse, is they get a stellar dome, which has everything in it. And they can use a dome when they take it out and about. And the other beauty about the stellar dome is, if you've got mold in your roof cavity, and mold in roof cavities, mold causes radiation. So mold in a roof cavity, by the shape of your roof cavity, which is the underside of the pyramid, the mold in there creates a radiation charge that goes down. And the stellar dome with its shape, that dome shape creates a radiance that goes up to neutralise the charge coming down. Wi-Fi doesn't cause mold. You've got to have the mold first. That's a separate energy to the Wi-Fi.
Hey, Andrina from the UK has just come through. She's just asking. She obviously hasn't listened. She's just come on, so she's going to listen to it afterwards. But are we talking about, for her situation for protection, taking the dome, just like your wife was taking it around with her in the purse?
Yep. Yep. The UK's, UK's got its own energetic problems. A lot of those houses that were built earlier this century and last century, and they accumulate a lot of bioplasmic charge. And I'm often asked to do readings for properties in the UK, and you really don't have to do the reading because you know what's going to be going on.
Oh, they've been.
But you do
Have the Vikings, the Normans, they've been
Yep.
under conquest, Romans, you name it, isn't it?
Yep.
Aussie football teams, yeah, they've always
Yep.
been under distress.
Crooked kings and queens, crooked prime ministers, crooked First and Second World War, revolutions, you name it. It all adds to the whole thing.
So they're going to ask the question: what's the price on the Stellar Dome?
What's the Stellar Dome worth? They're both 187.
187
Yeah.
Australian dollars. Yeah.
Which is cheap. Like you can pay $1,000 for a box that plugs into a wall. I won't name anything. And when you do the comparison, the box is doing nothing for $1,000, and 187 is doing a lot of things. Now,
So there's a question. Sorry, there's a
Right.
question from Sherry East, and she says, I have a stellar dome and pendant. I still get effects from the paranormal activity in my house and geopathic stress. Also, why is that? Anything else I can do?
No, it wouldn't be paranormal. It wouldn't be geopathic because it's still done with geoclines and pendant would stop that. Usually when people have got products and they're still feeling stuff, they've actually got a virus. They've got something going on in their own body. I find with people who are electro-hypersensitive, who are very sensitive to radiation, that harmonizers, they think aren't doing anything because they're so sick that their biofield is inverted. Their biofield, instead of having a positive charge, has a negative charge, and they're perceiving their biofield, thinking it's the environment around them. I've known that for a long, long time. And even a few years ago, after a trip to Queensland, came home with Ross River fever, which causes severe rheumatoid arthritis, and you don't want to get that. And I was really, really sick, and I experienced that myself. It was fascinating for me because I remember being in a building which was energetically beautiful, and I'm standing there thinking, wow, this building, if I was wrong, I would perceive it to be really toxic because it was me I was reading, not the building.
Okay, thanks for that. Sherry does this. Yes, she does have viruses. Then there's another question from Caroline. Does the orgone pendant keep entities away from your energy field?
It does. Yep. I know that for a fact that when I do my consultancy work, if I'm wearing a pendant, the entity won't attach to me, it'll attach to someone else. Because there's also the program in that too. With the program for the frequency for the entity of the bioplasmic is actually in the pendants too. Although walking into a building with a pendant on isn't going to clear it, whereas a Stellar Dome will actually clear it.
I reckon you're going to get a spike in sales after this, sure.
Hey,
It's just about getting the information out and getting it. It's different to what a lot of people talk about, but these are the things that are really going on around us. That's what I'm all about. Some people have said I've referred to me as being the bloke who talks about EMF and beyond, and the beyond is the out there stuff. And it's not woo-woo. It's actually what probably 60% of it, 60 to 70% of us experience in our houses and our workplaces.
how much is the pendant, brother?
$55. Not
You're
expensive.
talking Australian money, yeah?
We got a new pendant coming soon. I'm zipped about it, which we're really excited about. We'll probably be releasing it in about 2 or 3 weeks' time.
Right.
So, because we're always doing research, always trying new things.
For those people who are really interested and want to follow you, you've got a YouTube channel, you do webinars as well, right? And you train
That's
people
right.
too.
Yeah. And on our website, we've got a contact page, so they can email questions or email their addresses, so we can do property readings. So, as I said before, when I'm not out consulting or you know, looking over the manufacturing or doing things like that, or at expos, which we used to do when we weren't locked up, I spend all day sitting in front of the computer with my mobile phone, talking to people, doing their readings for them on their properties. Because some people have some really big aha moments, like, you know, some people are curious with the reading, they don't care what they get, and they've got nothing going on, but other people have got some really big issues going on in their household, and are looking for answers, and they're looking under every stone. And one stone they look under is a radiation one. And when they come to me, when I say, okay, you've got a fissure and someone's died on your property, this, that, and that, and that, it can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's giving them the answers as to why someone's reacting, why someone's behaving in a certain way, why someone's not recovering from an illness, why someone's not feeling well, when they go away on a holiday, they feel great. When they come back to their own home, they feel terrible. And when they go away from holiday, not always is your holiday accommodation great. But if you've got big things going on at home where you are all the time, you really do notice the difference when you take yourself out of that environment and then go back into it.
How much is for the geo cleanse, brother?
Sorry?
For the geo cleanse.
Say again?
For the geo cleanse.
They're $187.
Oh, the same price as the Stellar Dome, yeah? Hey,
yeah.
As our audiences in the UK and New Zealand, and UK people, the Americans will come in tomorrow. Hey, those prices that you're quoting, they're actually here in Australia. That's
Australian dollars.
Australian dollars. Does that include local postage and handling within Australia, or is that on top of that again?
That includes GST postage and handling in Australia is only $10.
So we add that onto it, yeah?
Dollar thing to the American dollar, it's really cheap for the Americans, and even to English pound, it's very, very cheap.
Okay, so I just put plus $10 for postage and handling, yeah? Is that right?
In Australia, internationally, we just charge a flat rate of 25, which is a good rate because we've lately had to be using DHL, not trying to name anyone, instead of Australia Post, because we all know that Australia Post have let us all down. We've got mail going to the UK and America. It's been sitting in a warehouse since March. And
mate, can I tell you something? I had the Australian Post ring me up, and we shipped 2 40-foot high cube containers out of Queensland to Auckland. Bag loads of mail, because New Zealand shut down for 9 weeks, and it was just stacking up. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've got some stuff which we've paid for to send express air freight is going to America by ship, like crazy.
I know. Hey, try DHL Express, not DHL themselves. Try DHL Express. It's a different division, different company structure.
Yeah, we had a client in Vancouver who his big order got stuck in a warehouse in Melbourne, and we shipped it again. On the Friday afternoon, it was picked up by DHL Express. It arrived there on the Monday morning.
Yeah.
That's really good service. Like it wasn't that expensive.
Mm. Yeah.
Okay, one last question, Gerard, from Caroline. What material is the GeoCleanse made of? Is it a crystal?
It's made of a resin. It's frequency-infused ionic resin. I have a background from a long time ago in resins and paints and building materials like adhesives and things like that. I've worked for many years in those industries, which really was very helpful and handy for me when I first started to make energy products. And I got a lot of knowledge about what's good and what's bad. So we found a really good non-yellowing, non-toxic to environment, non-toxic to our workers resin that gives us a great finish and holds the frequency absolutely beautifully. So it's a synthetic product, but it's a nice product, put it that way. It won't cause you any harm. It doesn't outgas or anything like that. The GeoCleanse, when it goes into a power point, can't burn a house down. And that's something you've got to be careful of with these small harmonizers that go into power points with electronics in it. The GeoCleanse doesn't have electronics, it works differently. But those ones that go into the filters that go into the power points, they have burnt houses down in Australia and overseas. And even like those little rodent detectors that go into a power point, or the rodent not detectors, those rodent deterrents. They catch fire. There's been a history of them catching fire. And those rodent deterrents too, when you have them, create a really dirty, toxic radiation field that extends out 4 or 5 meters around them. Not only are they harmful to the rodents, they're very harmful to the humans. But if you've got a geoclines or a stellodome, that neutralises that charge anyway.
All right. Well, just to wrap up, what have I... Oh, go on.
I just want to
Jeff?
confirm that I've got down on the bottom there for people to read. Okay, so they'll be watching the replays. I just want to make sure I've got everything right in case I have to change it. So it's $10 for postage and handling for Australians. It's $25 for UK, Europeans, Americans, Canadians. Do I throw $25 in for New Zealanders as well?
Yeah, that same price. Because we're sending everything overseas via not DHS Express, their standard service, which is really, really good. It gets there for 7 or 8 days, which is fine for most people.
Okay, just make sure I've got that all sorted.
So just to summarise, avoid digital TVs.
If you're not
Flower
protected, then
rat deterrents, rodent deterrents, and negative psychic impressions, or
nasty, toxic people.
those are cool. Go outside, do it outside, 50 meters away from home. Is that right?
Yep.
You can see what's going to happen now. You're going to have to put a mirror, big, large mirror on the opposite wall to the TV, like a periscope, and you
beam it back there, watch it explode.
Well, actually, the mirror will actually deflect the energy. If you've had a death in a property, one way to know whether there's bioplasmic charge from a death is that the mirrors hold an energy, or they reflect the energy out, and the mirrors there. It's hard to show. The mirrors there. That energy that projects out from the mirror goes out about that far in front of it. I had a consultancy in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago where a young girl didn't really get what I was talking about. There had been a death in the building, and she had a mirror in the lounge room and said, just put your hands out, use your hands like an antenna. They're the best radar in the world. And come close to the mirror, and she could actually feel it in her palms. Now, these are the best lie detectors in the world too. If crooked governments really wanted to shut us up, they'd cut our hands off so we couldn't feel what's going on. That's part of our intuitiveness, so to speak.
Yeah, you can dose with them. But that's funny because my girls would never sleep. They would avoid sleeping where there was a mirror because they said you could see the ghost in the mirror. Yeah.
If you had the into the house, yeah, absolutely. The young children are very, very intuitive too. Some just unfortunately, a lot of them have beaten out of them by toxic parents by the time they get to their teens.
Hey, brother, I'm just going to drop Julia and myself off and just to bring you back on the screen. Can you just show that stellar dome? Because there's a few interested people on that stellar dome. If you could just pull that up.
That's which way am I going? That's the stellar dome. However, as from, we're hoping next week, we have a limited edition. There'll be only 1,000 of them made of Stellar Dome Gold limited edition. It looks different on the bottom, which works the same as the green Stellar Dome. It's just a different colour. We're having our 20th birthday celebration. We thought we would celebrate it with not so much a new product, a different product, because we've got lots of people out there around the world who really love what we do. We thought by having a limited edition product, if those people really like what we do, we'd love to have one. If they didn't have a Stellar Dome, the gold, when they're available, are going to be great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful idea. Well, that's great.
Absolutely. Oh, Leanne's saying it should be available from Wednesday. We're hoping to relaunch our new website on Wednesday, which that hopefully gets launched at the same time.
Okay, well, I guess that wraps it up, Jeff, huh?
Hey, brilliant, mate.
Well, good.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. You're a fountain of knowledge, and It's wonderful that there's people like you who are dedicating their lives to cleaning up the what do you call it, bioplasmic field that we have to, as frogs, we have to sit in. So.
It's a fascination and it's enjoyable. Like, we'll just keep on going and going and going. But thanks very much for having me and the opportunity. If you want to do this again, just let me know. We've done heaps of webinars from where I'm sitting right here over the last few months, and with lockdown, we're now starting to do private group webinars where you might have a group of people who might come visit your house, and we'll jump on Zoom, and I can do a talk for people, and then they can ask their questions.
Well, I'm quite sure our friends over in the UK would love that. So, what's that? 7:30 at night would be 10:30 in the morning, or 7 o'clock here would be 10 o'clock in the morning. That would suit them. I would say on the time zone difference. Yeah. I just found your Sky Dome. I've just got it up.
The Stellar Dome, yeah, on the website.
Stellar Dome, yeah. My apologies. Yeah. Very good, mate. Bloody good to have you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah. And I'll just throw that last photo up where you're beavering away at those expos, I think that's a good finish there when we get that photo up. They can look for your bald head. There you go. Where are you? There you go. And they all get to know who you are. So come and get a
Paisley shirt on.
That's right. Hey, yeah. So when you go to all different festivals, because you go to the main ones, don't you? Really, primarily.
Yeah, when they're on, when we're all not locked up. Yeah, we've so far this year we've missed out on 3 major ones because of COVID. Yep. We've got one planned for Melbourne in November, which is, fingers crossed that we don't have a second and third wave and more manipulation of the public. Because we really enjoy doing the expos. They're very tiring. They really do wear us out. But just being face to face with the people and being able to meet people and do their readings and help them with their energy problems is very enjoyable. Mind you, by not having these expos over the last couple of months, has given us a bit of a breather, and it's actually allowed that extra space or time for creativity to come up with things like this and a new product, which hopefully comes up in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, so we've just put up a thank you there, and we've given you a phone number there. People can ring you up as well as your email for approaching you about doing a free thing over
Google Earth.
Yeah. It just brings so many people. That's how Julia said, "Oh, I met this guy. Does this?" I said, "Yep, I know the guy. I got one of them."
Yep. All good.
Brilliant. Anything else, Julia?
No, thank you. Thank you to those that are watching it now and in the future. Aroa from us. And if you have if you know somebody that is basically dreaming the dream, or you have certain areas that you're interested in, do drop us a note on Facebook or via the website Radio FM 88 and let us know what inspires you.
Okay, so have we got something really interesting coming on next Thursday? Yeah. He's like you, Gerard. He's an inventor. There you go. Give him the drum roll there, Julia.
Yeah. We actually it's quite complimentary because you're talking about frequencies today. So we have Thomas Stauracher coming online to talk with us next week. He is working with sound waves to provide healing support for people who have chronic illnesses or cancer, and he's been having amazing results with it. I actually went to visit him today with a friend and try out the technology. So join us next Thursday to find out more.
So is it an acoustic chair or an acoustic table? Or how does it?
Acoustic restoration therapy. It's actually a waterbed that sound waves go through, and a lot of us are interested in cymatics. And it seems to use that technology to help the body come back into homeostasis and back into healing state. So plug those holes that have been caused by frequencies negatively charged.
No, it's important to get people like Thomas and Gerard and the others that we've had on, and the ones that are coming. I mean, I think it's very important to bring all that to the surface and, you know, open people's consciousness in it. Gerard, you're part of the team, brother.
No worries.
All right, bless you. It's a good
Thanks,
afternoon,
Jeff.
good morning, good evening, good
That's
afternoon,
right.
wherever you are around the world at this time of the day. Yeah. All right.